Hello, I'm Dana Connors, President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is proud to represent thousands of Maine employers of all sizes in all parts of the state and to advocate on their behalf at the State House in Augusta and in our nation's capital. We are honored to present tonight's gubernatorial debate, and we thank New Center Maine for their near 30-year partnership with us. This year's gubernatorial forum and election are unique. Incumbent Governor Janet Mills faces former Governor Paul LePage as Maine, the nation, and the world are coping with the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. We look forward to a constructive debate tonight on the issues that matter to Maine people and businesses, and hearing each candidate's plans to strengthen Maine's economy and address our current challenges, while continuing to leverage Maine's quality of life and place to attract more people to live, to work, and do business here. Thank you to each candidate for participating this evening. Thank you, tonight's viewers, for watching. And please make sure your voice is heard by voting this election year.
Good evening from the Holiday Inn by the Bay in downtown Portland. I'm Pat Callahan. On behalf of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, we welcome you to this New Center Maine Voice of the Voter Forum in the race for governor. Tonight we are going to hear from two candidates who are well known to the people of Maine, Democratic Governor Janet Mills, who is seeking a second term, and former Republican Governor Paul LePage, who is seeking a third term in the Blaine House. For the next hour, I'll be posing questions to the candidates, many of them sent to us by viewers. Trust me when I tell you there were a lot of them, plenty of interest in this race. Each candidate will be able to weigh in on each topic. There will be no strict time limit on answers, but I will be keeping things moving so we can get to as many questions as possible. And each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. We ask that our audience here at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce annual meeting refrain from applauding during the forum, except for at the end of the hour and right now, as we welcome our candidates, Governor Janet Mills and former Governor Paul LePage. Thank you both for being here this evening. We appreciate that. We want to begin with really a pretty basic question, and we'll start with former Governor LePage. What do you think is the most important issue for voters in this election, and why are you the person to address that?
I think the most important issue is inflation, and I also believe it's man-made. I think it started here in Maine, and it crept down to Washington. It started long before the Ukraine war. And when you banned fossil fuels in 2022, you're asking for some major problems. And that's where we are right now.
Governor Mills, most important issue.
The most important issue in this election is leadership. Who do you want to lead the state of Maine in the next 4 years? And that means looking at both our histories. What did we do and how did we do it? How did we manage with the legislature? How did we deal with the needs of the day? What other emergencies did we deal with? And how did Maine fare? Right now, I challenge you to think how Maine is doing. Of course, inflation is an issue. Healthcare is an issue. Education is always an issue. But how does a leader deal with that? I deal with it by talking to all parties, bringing people to the table, and designing solutions to problems. I deal with things by attacking problems, not people.
Let's get into some specifics if we can. Let me ask you first, Governor Mills. Can Maine sustain the size of the state budget as it is now without the continuing major influx of federal dollars?
Thanks. Well, the federal dollars that we receive, we were so fortunate to receive in the last couple of years because of the pandemic relief money, and then American Rescue Funds, and soon infrastructure monies from the bipartisan infrastructure plan, thanks to our congressional delegation. Those monies are basically for one-time projects, and I could spend an hour telling you what we're doing with that. I think you'll agree they are for one-time projects to sustain Maine over the long term. The economists, the experts have said very recently that Maine's budget is sustainable and robust and in good shape, that we are in good shape to pay our bills and to withstand a recession if there is one in the next few months or few years. So I stand on their reports. That's what they have said.
Governor LePage, what say you?
A lot of talk, no action from my opponent. In 2011, I became your governor. I had a $1.3 billion shortfall. I had another $750 million off-balance sheet debt to the hospitals. I had an unemployment rate of 8.2%. I left the state in 2019 in the best shape it's been in 50 years, and now we're back to where we were in 2011. I have been there. I've done it once. I can do it again. I am the guy that's got a business background. And a business background works this way. In the private sector, when you spend more money and you get less results, you get fired, Governor.
Governor LePage, you've talked about wanting to reduce and eventually eliminate Maine's income tax. You've said perhaps that's an 8-year project. What kinds of programs, and be specific if you can, are going to be reduced or eliminated?
You don't need to reduce. You need to get rid of the fat, the spending. I came in 2011. We have 14,500 employees. We trimmed it down to 11,900, and we were answering the phone, folks. We had somebody in the office answering the phones. Today, it's back up to 13,500. We don't need 13,500. We're one of the heaviest manned states in the country. New Hampshire, who is beating the pants off the state of Maine right now, they have a positive budget, a positive growth pattern. We have a negative growth pattern. They operate with 9,500. We can't be at 9,500. I agree with that because of our road structure, but we could be at 10,500.
Governor Mills, can you reduce the income tax in the situation as you look forward?
Let me back up, because there have been some accusations made about the status of our state and our state's economy. Let me be real clear. Maine's unemployment rate is down to 3.3. It was 2.8 just a couple months ago. We have recovered all the jobs that we lost since the pandemic, during the pandemic. That's a huge jump. The state's economic growth has been the 11th best in the country. That's what the experts say. Under Mr. LePage's tenure, we were always towards the bottom. In one year, we were 49th in the country in recovery from the last recession. We've had a record number of new businesses come to Maine and still coming to Maine. So in terms of reducing taxes, I have pledged not to increase taxes. I have not increased taxes. We have reduced taxes in many respects, property taxes and income taxes too. And so when he talks about New Hampshire and comparing us, I like to think that what we're doing now and what we've been doing from day one is rebuilding our state infrastructure. Mr. LePage saw fit to basically decimate the Maine CDC. The first year in office, I rebuilt the Maine CDC and the Maine Department of Education, hired more child care workers and child welfare workers. So important to do. And they're doing their job. We didn't contract out services anymore. We kept the state employees who knew what to do and what they were doing, and I respect them for that.
Well, what you say raises a question for Governor LePage. Did you, in fact, cut health care and the DHHS as well as the public health service in a dangerous way?
No. What we did, we were reconfiguring the public health system. What was happening in 2011 is public health nurses were supposed to make 5 calls a day. We had some nurses making less than 5 calls per week. So we were rewriting the job description, and we were going to move forward with it. I will say this, the last 2 quarters, we have been down we've decreased our GDP by 2.5%. New Hampshire's gone up by 2.5%. Governor, I'm sorry to say, but I don't know who is giving you your numbers, and I will give you the benefit of being an attorney, but you're one hell of a bad economist.
Governor Mills?
You know, I've spent the better part of my career listening to loud men talk tough to disguise their weaknesses. And that's what I'm hearing tonight from Paul LePage. That's what I heard for 8 years from Paul LePage. His weakness is having not led the state, but supervised the state during one of the worst economic recoveries in the nation. I've led one of the best recoveries in the nation. We are 11th best. Talk to the economists who know these things. Talk to national conservative economists who've rated Maine 11th best in the country, not 49th where we were in 2016. We're doing a pretty damn good job under difficult circumstances too. We dealt with a pandemic that really undermined everybody's economy. Every state in the country, every country in the world suffered economically. This was a huge challenge, and the experts, the economists say that Maine did the best of any state in the country in recovering economically from the pandemic. The only other state they mentioned was Hawaii, and all Hawaii had to do was close their airport, so we're number one.
Governor
Okay,
LePage.
look, let's not filibuster like Monday night, please. This is the facts right here, and I can give you where the facts came from, where all the details. Third highest food costs in America, fourth highest residential rates in America, from 11th to 4th in the last 3 years. Worst unemployment recovery in the country. Ninth highest tax burden in America. Record number of children death 2 years in a row. Record number of overdose deaths 3 years in a row. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for our children and young adults between the ages of 10 and 30 years old. These are facts. These are, you can all, and I can give you all the source documents. The fact of the matter is, the economy is not doing well. And I took an economy that was in the bottom. It was the worst recession in the history of the country, and I left you a lot of money, and you spent it in 10 months.
Well, let me go back. Just take it right off the top. Third highest food costs. During Paul LePage's term as governor, we had the third highest food
I checked that and you're lying.
Excuse me.
You're lying.
I'm speaking. We had the
I know,
third
you speak all talk
highest.
and no
Let her
action.
finish, please.
We had the third highest food costs in the nation during Paul LePage's tenure. The press have fact-checked so many of his statements through now 3 full debates, now going into a 4th. Everything he said, he insisted was true. Many of those things were fact-checked and found to be false. That's not me saying it, but the press have said it, and I don't disagree.
Now, I mentioned we have a lot of questions from our viewers. I want to get to one of those right now. This is from Melissa Brown, no town given. She says, I'm a registered nurse who had to choose between my career and taking the mandated shot against COVID. I've been out of the job I love for over a year now. I'm wondering what each candidate's stand is on this. Governor Mills, she says, in her opinion, the mandate has never stopped the transmission of the virus.
Okay. And you want me to answer that first? Certainly. Look, what I say is, anybody who has to go into a nursing home or a healthcare facility, a hospital, wherever, you deserve to be cared for by a person who has been fully protected themselves against contagious diseases. In the beginning of the pandemic, we found people catching the virus in the hospitals, some of them getting very, very ill from that, and some of them dying. And the virus was being brought into the hospitals, nursing homes, and healthcare facilities. So based on the best science, the best medical advice possible, and based on the request of the hospitals and medical facilities, we did impose a work requirement that anybody working in certain healthcare professions be fully vaccinated, as they already are from other contagious diseases.
Governor LePage, please.
Well, first of all, I will agree with the governor that in March of 2020, we didn't know what it was. And our healthcare workers were heroes in 2020, but they became zeros in 2021. I do not agree that the current science says that the vaccines prevent transmission. I think we know that it affects people with compromised immunities and different types of vulnerable groups. Those, I believe, we need to concentrate and protect. But I don't believe there was any compassion in October of 2021 when healthcare workers and first responders were fired because they wouldn't take a vaccine just before Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they were not allowed to take unemployment. That, to me, is not only cruel, it is absolutely inhumane.
Last word on this.
The pandemic was difficult. You have said that I was fortunate to have a pandemic. I can't believe you uttered those words, but it was difficult for everybody. But Maine came through it. Maine has come through it with one of the best responses in the nation. That's what the experts say. With one of the highest vaccination rates and one of the lowest death rates, despite having the highest average age. That's good results.
Now, the next question from a viewer is related to this topic, and it's from Emily Rinchich, also no town given. A CDC panel voted unanimously to add the COVID vaccine to the childhood immunization schedule. Their stated reasoning was to make it free and accessible to everyone, not to mandate it for schools. States will decide if it's mandated for school children. Governor LePage, if you're elected, would you be in favor of requiring this vaccine for kids to go to school in Maine?
Absolutely not.
Governor Mills?
Period.
No.
Why not?
No, because it's still an emergency use authorization. It was recommended by the National Association of CDC Directors to recommend to pediatricians that they speak with parents about getting the vaccine for their child. I'm sure a lot of that depends on the age of the child, the kind of vaccines that are available now, the kinds that might be available in the future.
Let's talk about the workforce in Maine. Though Maine's population has been growing, the available workforce has dropped by more than 20,000 people since 2018. Governor Mills, what can we do to address this?
Well, we've done a lot to address it, actually. Look, first of all, we're talking to hundreds of businesses and business leaders across the state. What they tell me they need is not just workforce, but the things that people need to be on the job, take a job, stay on the job. That means investing in Maine people. That's what we're doing right now. We're investing in training. We're investing in childcare. We're investing in housing. I don't know how many businesses I've talked with that said, we need housing. Bath Iron Works went to try to hire several thousand people. Several hundred came and they couldn't find housing and left. That's happening all over the state. So we're using some of those federal funds to build up housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, market rate housing, and childcare, which is so important to working parents, to know that their child is being cared for in a safe learning environment while they go to work. That's a problem that we've seen since the pandemic was crucially exposed during the pandemic, when women left the workforce in particular. So we're doing that, and 2 years free tuition at the community colleges so people can get skilled up. More money to the CTEs. We put 10% higher enrollment in the CTEs.
Governor LePage, what's your take on this? What's your plan?
My take is very simple. When I left, the unemployment rate was lower than it is right now, and we didn't have signs on every 100 feet on every main street trying to hire people. Stop paying people to stay home, put people to work. This governor took away the work rules, and what's happening is we've gone from 65% workforce participation to under 59% with a 3% unemployment rate, and we've got thousands of jobs that people have to close a couple of days a week because they can't keep their businesses open. Put people who are able-bodied back to work.
May I? I mean, that's
Quickly, please.
Need to respond. Our workforce shortage is a problem that is long-standing. I can show you the headlines all during his tenure as governor. Maine's workforce shortage is at a critical stage. It's a problem I inherited, but it's not one I'm going to pass on to my grandchildren. Our unemployment rate right now is lower than the national unemployment rate, lower than the New England unemployment rate. Our workforce participation rate is 84% for the prime working age. Everybody knows that Maine suffered a lot during the pandemic. And we suffered because many people retired early. Across the nation, they retired early. Because Maine has a higher average age, more people proportionally retired early here than in other states. We're addressing that problem on a lot of levels and hope to continue to do so.
Well, you inherited 65% workforce participation in January of 2019. It is currently at 58.8%. And your unemployment is high. Maine was dead last in unemployment recovery between 20 and 2021. It's simply asking people to go back to work. I have met hundreds of small businesses that have set up interviews and people don't show up, and the career centers have not called in and taken those people off unemployment.
Can I just briefly?
Quickly,
There are only
please.
about 1,800 people in the whole state that are collecting unemployment right now. And yes, there is a work or school requirement for welfare programs. Medicaid, no, because that's to keep people healthy, period, so that they can work.
Let's talk about another subject, if we could. Maine's problem with PFAS contamination keeps growing, and our awareness of it does as well. This week, for example, a school in Carmel said it is no longer using its water for drinking and cooking because of high levels of the forever chemicals. We reported on News Center this evening that state wildlife officials are expanding PFAS testing, including other wildlife such as turkeys, yet Maine has very limited capacity for this testing. Governor LePage, what are your short-term and long-term plans for addressing PFAS crisis?
Short-term, we need more labs in the state so we can test. We need to beef up our testing, and we need to be more robust. I believe it was caused by the state of Maine, and it's a responsibility of the state of Maine. And I think we need to get onto our farms and make sure that the farms are clean and made whole.
Governor Mills?
Well, if it was the state's fault, I guess I would look to Mr. LePage for what remedies he imposed or suggested during his 8 years as governor. Why didn't he address the PFAS situation? I addressed it right off the bat, creating a task force because we could see this coming, and we are addressing it. And with the legislature, in a very bipartisan fashion, we have appropriated about $100 million, and we are doing testing right now. And we are bringing the testing equipment to Maine, opening testing facilities in Maine. I have met with some of these small family farmers, and my heart breaks to hear what losses they've incurred. And I want to remedy the situation as badly as anybody, and that's why we're working with the legislature and the farmers and people across Maine to remediate, to provide income replacement, and to test and to get to the root of this problem.
I have another viewer question. This is from Warren Carlson of Canaan. He's concerned about gun violence and asks, what would the candidates commit to do to make schools or other public places safer in this state with regard to gun violence? Governor Mills?
Thank you. Well, here's what I have done. I've brought people to the table, around the same table, NRA folks, Sportsmen's Alliance, law enforcement, forensic psychologists, gun control advocates, and people. We worked out what's called a yellow flag bill, and we did this in a very bipartisan manner. We enacted a bipartisan yellow flag bill. It got about I think a unanimous vote in the state Senate. That's pretty good for a gun bill. And then we enacted the School Safety Center, and we funded it in this current budget. And that School Safety Center is going around to the schools across the state of Maine, making sure that our school children are safe when they're at school during the day. But it takes bringing people together to address violence. I feel good that we have the lowest violent crime rate in the country, according to the FBI, that Wallet Hub has declared we are one of the safest states in the country. All good things, but we can never do enough to prevent violence, and I'll keep doing that.
Governor LePage?
Well, I think, first of all, I would take away all signs that say gun-free zone from our schools. I believe that law-abiding citizens should have the ability to protect their families and our schools. So I do not believe in cutting back on resource officers. I do believe that mental illness is one of the biggest issues facing our nation. And unfortunately, we were trying to make some headway in dealing with mental illness, but this governor decided she needed a new visiting wing at Wyndham.
The documents obtained by News Center Maine show the Long Creek Youth Development Center let employees sleep in housing that's supposed to be used for young girls transitioning out of the correctional facility. A former employee told us workers would crash in the building, sleep there, between their 16-hour shifts. Among other things, this highlights the severe staffing shortages that we see at jails and correctional facilities in Maine. Governor LePage, how do we address that dangerous trend?
There is 2 or 3 things that we can do. Number one is we need to get people back to work, number one. Number two, we have to go to the Criminal Justice Academy. And what they're doing right now, we have an enormous shortage, but they're only running all the training at the Criminal Justice Academy. I think we have to develop some satellite areas because the training is 18 weeks, and the new people that are going into the industry do not want to be away from home for 18 weeks. So we have to rethink how we're training people, and we have to do a much better job recruiting right from high school on through the community college system and criminal justice system altogether.
Governor Mills?
Well, your question was about Long Creek.
Yes.
And
But it also speaks to the broader problem of county jails just don't have enough people,
Right.
and they're working dangerous amounts of overtime. We've seen
But it's
that.
also teachers at Long Creek. And we've had a problem retaining teachers at Long Creek for a while. You remember when my predecessor cut those contracts and wanted to farm out the teachers at Long Creek, and it was quite a controversy. But we want to have a core group of teachers at Long Creek or any other similar institution. We've been working with the legislature. The population of Long Creek is down to the 20s, or low 20s, I think. But if those allegations are true, and I can't validate them one way or the other, then we absolutely need to do more to hire help. The jails are in a tough spot. We actually have one of the best law enforcement training programs in the country at the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. I've taught the classes, and we have field classes too. It's not just at the academy. A lot of the training is done in the field and in the jails. And yes, I've worked with jails and sheriffs across the state of Maine. I'm all for hiring more and addressing the overtime issues.
Governor LePage?
Yeah, a couple other things we could be doing. For instance, military police. Military police have a lot of training, but here at the Criminal Justice Academy, we don't accept people from the military into the system. They have to go through the entire training. The other thing that we need to do is take a look at our reciprocal agreements with other states. With some states, you can come into Maine and go right to work. Other states, you got to go back through the Criminal Justice Academy. I think we can work with the Criminal Justice Academy to bring it up to the current needs of our state.
We require a background check for people from out of state, just to be sure.
Noted. Governor LePage, will you commit to maintaining the 55% state funding for schools?
Who sets up the 55% is what I don't understand, because in the 8 years I was governor, that's a moving target all the time. The state has no say in how it gets established. If we can agree between the school systems and the state of Maine on what goes into the 55%, absolutely. But when I was governor, they would not allow health insurance or the retirement system to be part of education. Well, it is clearly part of education. It's part of the compensation package. When you included that, several years we were above 55%.
Governor Mills?
Yes, and what it's based on is, in statute, essential programs and services. It's 55% of essential programs and services, which is what goes into the classroom. It's nice. We also fund teacher retirement and health insurance, but that's not what goes into the classroom. And that's the standard. And by those standards, we have certainly met the state's share of 55% funding for education, and I intend to continue that. And we set aside, I think, $30 million in the current budget for reserves for school funding.
Governor LePage?
Well, as I said earlier, in the real world, when you spend more money and you get worse results, you get fired. Maine's educational scores in math and reading are the worst in New England and some of the worst in the country. Fourth grade reading scores are the lowest since the statistic has been been recorded. Fourth grade math are now at the lowest level since year 2000. Only 32% of our kids, right now, only 32% are proficient. Janet Mills is pushing an extreme woke on our kids. Her draconian shutdown set our kids up for failure. Time to get back to basics: reading, writing, history, and civics. We need a Parents' Bill of Rights. Today, I'm releasing a website. It's called janetmillslied.com. And it comes from the Department of Education.
Very adult.
Everything on it is what is on the Department of Education's website. And I will tell you, we need our vocational training back to the 7th grade. We need to have parents have a say in what their children are learning. We also need to have our parents opt out if there is some sexually explicit information that is hurting our children.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Governor Mills, first of all,
Yeah, can we go back to education?
It is
Look,
education.
listen. As the daughter of a long-time Maine public school teacher, I know firsthand how critical our educators are, the ed techs and the teachers and the staffs, and the value they provide to all our children, our families, and to the state. Our children deserve equal access to the same opportunities for quality education, no matter their zip code, and that's what the Maine Constitution requires as well. Look, we have low sample test scores, which came out the other day. Our test scores, the regular test scores, were declining since 2011. All 8 years of Mr. LePage's tenure, our test scores went down. Our test scores, the random test scores that were published the other day, are higher than a lot of red states. This is not a Republican and Democratic thing, frankly, but a lot of children suffered during the pandemic, and I want to invest in them to bring them back up to speed. After-school programs and summer programs. But look, when Idaho, Maryland, North Dakota had lower test scores than us, I don't think it's my fault in particular, but things have happened, and we need to invest in our kids, provide them the best opportunity we can.
Governor LePage, can you elaborate? You called the draconian shutdown of schools a big part of the problem in Maine. Yeah. In the first year of the pandemic, when there was no vaccine, what would you have done if you'd been in charge then?
Well, in the first year, I would have been a lot more careful about going to Zoom education. I would have done a lot more testing than the governor did. We know several months into the pandemic, long before 2021 came, that it was not affecting children. So we could have protected our teachers a lot more, but the mask on our kids was really over the top. And Maine is struggling, one of the worst states. And there are a lot of red states and a lot of blue states that are doing much better than Maine. Maine is at the bottom of the heap.
Governor Mills?
The states I just mentioned are states that kept their schools wide open to the chagrin of many of the teachers who got ill. And they got sicker. And their test scores went down, even though their classrooms were open. We tried to keep kids educated the best way we could. We trained up learning facilitators at the community colleges and put them in the classroom so that when teachers were immunocompromised and had to stay home, somebody was there to channel the curriculum into the classroom. We didn't have the testing ability till at least late May of 2020. We had very little to go on nationally and in the state of Maine until May.
Let's talk about curriculum, which Governor LePage also brought up, and what's appropriate and what isn't. There's, excuse me, Governor Mills, there's an ad that's running right now that accuses you of, quote, putting pornographic books such as Gender Queer in the Maine elementary school system, unquote. Has your Department of Education had anything to do with recommending such books, or is this strictly a local call?
Look, we have parents' rights in Maine. Many of my friends are parents. I'm a parent. Parents serve on our school boards, and it's important that they be heard, and they are heard. Every week I pick up the paper, and there's a vigorous discussion at a school board about a poster or a book or a curriculum. That's happening. I don't mandate any particular books, but what the schools are teaching is math, history, writing, science, basics. That's what we're doing in Maine schools, and I respect the school administrators and teachers who are taking the brunt of these kinds of accusations and being, we have a hard enough time recruiting good teachers and retaining good teachers. I want them to be, able to teach what they feel is appropriate in this classroom and what the local school boards feel is appropriate.
Governor LePage, that book we referenced, the one called Gender Queer, has been challenged in a number of school districts, and mostly the school boards have said, no, it is appropriate to have it available for students who need that sort of information.
Absolutely, and I'm not suggesting that the books be taken out. My objection is it's being done without the parents' knowledge. The parents are not being brought in. Go to janetmillslie.com, and there's not just that book. There's a lot of stuff. Folks, I'm telling you, parents have the right to educate and be part of the education of their children. They also have a right to know what is being taught to their children, and they should have the ability to opt out if it's appropriate for their lifestyle.
And when we argue about books like this, what do you think the message is to LGBTQ Mainers? What would you say to them?
I say to them, the book is fine. Just give parents the ability to have a say. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying bar the book. I'm saying, folks, The parents need to know if they want to opt out of their children, let them opt out. I met a gentleman not too long ago, as a Marine, a retired Marine, 15 years in the Marine, has a little daughter that comes to him, and she's in kindergarten, and she said, "Dad, from now on, you call me Stevie, because I want to be a boy." And he said, "Where did that come from?" And he said, "That's cool." And so he didn't have any idea that that was going on.
Governor
And when
Mills?
he tried to go...
I don't know about Steve, but I do know that there are thousands and
No, wait a
thousands
minute.
of books
Wait,
in
can
the
I finish?
All right,
library.
finish the story quickly, please.
Could I finish, please? You asked me to wait last week. Now I'm asking you for a
He
second.
called on me, so.
My point is, the parent need to have a say. That's all I'm saying.
Don't parents have a say in schools?
Parents do have a say. If they want to know what's in the school library, go to the school library, talk to the librarian. There are plenty of great libraries. They'll tell you exactly what's in the school library if you really want to know. If you object to what the child is being taught, talk to the teacher, talk to the school board. That's exactly what is happening today in our schools. We have a tradition, a culture of local control, and I value that tradition, which does give parents a voice.
And what is your message to LGBTQ Mainers when we argue about a book like this?
I respect you. I want you to be informed, and I want you to be educated in the best way possible. And I want you to have, you know, a good life here in Maine.
You know, one thing I would like to say, Pat, very, very important here. When parents have to FOIA the school district to get a curriculum information, that is wrong. And I've had several people write me letters and say, I have to FOIA to get the information.
Let's get to one of our viewer questions if we can. This is from Cynthia Lambert, and she asks, please ask Paul LePage if he and his wife cashed the $850 checks that were sent out to Mainers. Since he opposed the checks, I'd like Mainers to hear if he accepted and used the money.
I believe so, yes. I believe, I didn't get a letter, but I got a check.
So you filed an income tax return for Maine? Okay.
Yes, I always have. every
Governor
year.
Mills, did you get one?
I did not.
Did you refuse it on political grounds, or it
I
didn't
just
qualify?
filed my taxes 2 weeks ago, so before the 15th.
All right. Another viewer question, if we could. This is from D. Gordon Mott, who asks, if the House and Senate pass legislation in favor of advanced Wabanaki rights comparable to other federally recognized tribes, will you approve it? Governor Mills?
I'm not sure if he's referring to the state bill or the federal bill. I will say, my administration has done more than the last 5 governors, I would say, in enhancing relationships with the tribes. We have met regularly with tribal chiefs. We have worked on legislation together. We've improved water quality for sustenance fishing rivers. We've expanded the tribal court jurisdictions. This year alone, we sat together, my office and the tribes, for hundreds of hours and drafted a bill that gives that codifies collaboration with the tribes in Maine statute, gives them income tax benefits for their businesses, and authorizes them to exclusively operate online sports gambling, which is a big plus for them. So there's another bill that did not come to my desk. I raised objections to it. In its current form, in the form I saw it in, I would still have objections to it, but willing to work with them on that.
Governor LePage, should Maine's tribes have the same rights as other federally recognized tribes?
I'm wide open to sit down and talk to them about what it is that they're looking for, and I'm wide open. That never came up. The only issue that came up while in my 8 years is the Truth and Reconciliation, which I supported. However, the Democrat Secretary of State was on there, and when he was appointed the Secretary of State, I thought he had a conflict of interest, and then I did not support the outcome. But I do support sitting down with him.
We asked the candidates to pose a question to their opponent. Governor LePage, you have a question for Governor Mills?
Yes. Janet, years before Putin ever invaded the Ukraine, you banned fossil fuel investment in Maine. Did you do it because you didn't understand the impact of your decision, or did you do it to force Maine people to buy electric cars when they can't even afford to buy the gas for their cars?
I'm sorry, you're talking about a bill to divest? Is that what you're talking about? the main
You
public.
banned investments in fossil fuels.
First of all, the bill doesn't ban investments in fossil fuels, but I've read the bill. And second of all, my main objective is to wean us off of our dependency on fossil fuels. We're seeing it right now with high fuel prices, gas and oil. And Maine, as you know, has had 60% of our homeowners are dependent on oil for home heat. We are pulling back from that and providing alternative heating sources and providing alternative energy sources, renewable energy, wind and solar that I know Mr. LePage doesn't like, but it's so critical to expand and diversify our energy sources, get away from oil. And another thing I will not do, which contrasts me and him, I will not support drilling for oil off the pristine coast of Maine. I can't think of anything more dangerous to the fisheries and to our coastal communities than oil rigs and oil spills along the coast of Maine. My opponent supported that. I do not.
You have a response, Governor LePage?
Yes, I have a response. Elliot Cutler's the one that brought up the whole thing about drilling on the coast of Maine, and we sent people out looking for it, but we didn't find any oil. There is no oil off the coast of Maine that I am aware of. There was some gas, and there was a pipeline that was built, and the gas came in, that well dried up, and there is no more that I'm aware of. So I do not support. So first of all, I am agnostic to technology. I'm agnostic, folks. I am agnostic to the technology that is used to create electricity. What I am not agnostic to is pricing. I think that we are paying the 4th highest electricity cost in America, and we were 11th when I left. Janet Mills and I will never be alive when the day comes that we are off fossil fuels. It's a long time in the future.
Last word on this, Governor?
But it is code red for humanity to reduce fossil fuels and dangerous greenhouse gas emissions. And our electricity prices are high because of gas. We rely on gas for generation of electricity.
Natural gas.
So, natural gas. And I'm sorry, but Mr. LePage not only joined but chaired the coalition of Gulf states to drill for oil off our coast. He was the only governor in the whole Atlantic seaboard that did not protest when Mr. Trump was proposing to do exactly that.
Let's turn the page. Governor Mills, you have a question?
Wait a minute. Now, this is not true.
A quick answer.
I was asked to chair a committee. I did. And that's all. And to say that we're going to get off fossil fuel, I want to minimize the use of fossil fuel wherever possible. But it's insane to think that we're paying $7 a gallon for kerosene, $6 a gallon for heating oil, going into this winter. And I was the mayor of Waterville in 2008. And folks, oil hit $4 a gallon, and we lost lives. And we're going to lose lives again this winter because this governor is so committed to the Green New Deal that she doesn't really care about Maine people.
There was a coalition to support drilling for oil offshore, and you chaired it. And, you know, just a minute.
I did.
I have a question.
Yes, you have a question for
I do.
Governor LePage.
I worked closely with the Maine Chamber of Commerce and many others to develop the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, using federal money to strengthen Maine's economy by investing in job training, in child care, in housing, helping forestry, farming, and fisheries, and helping businesses in broadband, child care, et cetera. With your history of rejecting federal funding for the state of Maine, would you reject the federal funding for our Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan?
It would depend on where the money goes. I did have a problem with some of the workforce development in the state of Maine, and we went to court and we lost. Granted, I lost. But what I was trying to do is put more money into the actual training of people rather than the overhead of the workforce development county agencies, which were taking as much as half of the money. I wanted to restrict it to 30%. So if it's a jobs bill that will help train people, I'm all in. If it's just a nonprofit that's going to create more jobs for your friends, no.
You rejected money, about $2 billion worth of federal funds during your term for health care, for forest legacy programs, for Alzheimer's research, for cancer research. You rejected federal dollars, wouldn't even let the departments apply for federal grants because it was federal money, and that money had to go to other states instead of to Maine.
We've got a question from a viewer, Thomas Record of Farmingdale, and it ties in a little bit with the energy questions we were just talking about. As we move away from gas-powered vehicles toward hybrids and electric vehicles, how do the candidates propose Maine proceed to protect the adequacy of the highway fund to maintain roads and bridges? Governor Mills?
That's a great question. That's exactly what the legislature has been looking at, diving into these last 2 years in particular. Bill Diamond and Brad Farron and others, and there are a lot of options. One option is a miles travel kind of option. Other states are experimenting with some of these things. I'm all in for looking at options. What I'm not all in for is increasing the gas tax. I do not support increasing the gas tax and will not support increasing the gas tax. What we have done, working with the Republicans, Democrats, and independents in the legislature, is to fund the highway fund without even borrowing this year, because we managed our budget, had a surplus, have a surplus coming in, and through the cascade, we've provided about $100 million for highway funding to repair some of those ancient bridges and roads that desperately need repair and fix the potholes.
Governor LePage, your take on this?
My take is that we need to find a way to make sure that electric cars, the several thousand that we have on the roads, pay a road use tax of some source, that they contribute the same way the gas tax. I also agree with the governor that we don't need to increase the gas tax. There are other ways that we can do it. And one way that they did it this year to meet their budget is they cut a lot of projects because they thought they were too expensive. We had a lot of federal monies that could have been used on roads.
The federal monies are being used on roads, but infrastructure money, et cetera. Yeah.
Governor LePage, the new tax stabilization program for seniors is now in place that freezes property taxes for seniors and reimburses towns and cities for the difference in what they would lose. But it is not funded beyond this year. Will that be in your budget?
That's certainly part of what I want to do. I believe that if I'm elected the governor in January, one of the first things I'm going to do is make sure that people that are on fixed incomes, that are on pensions, do not pay any income tax so they can get a benefit. I think the other thing I would look at very, very closely on the property tax, because the property tax is a decision that they make. And unfortunately, we need to help our elderly stay in their homes a lot longer. I would take a look at the piece that the education is funded, because education right now is overcoming most taxes. When it comes to property tax, most of it's education. And we need to take a hard look at education to help everybody with their property taxes.
Governor Mills?
Sure. I do agree that property taxes are a problem, and that's why it was one of the first problems we addressed in the first budget and continuing, because when Mr. LePage attempted to reduce the upper-level income taxes some years ago, that resulted in an increase in property taxes, a shift, not a reduction. Plus, the sales tax went up under his tenure as well, 5.5%, and he actually proposed increasing the sales tax to 6.5%. I would oppose that. But more importantly, we've been working on property tax reform in a bipartisan manner. On income taxes, we just enacted a budget this spring that waives income taxes, exempts income taxes for the first $35,000 of any pension or retirement plan. That's progress. And property taxes, we expanded the homestead exemption with help from the other side of the aisle, and we expanded the property tax fairness credit and we also fully funded the state share of education and revenue sharing back to 5%. He had taken it down to 2% and wanted it to go to 0. My tax bill came in.
Quick last word from Governor LePage. We got about 15 seconds before the break.
Okay. One of the issues that I have with towns, with the property tax, is we have Lands for Maine's Future, which the state sells bonds so that we can buy land And so we give the money to these buyers, and then we go and we take it off.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off on that. We have to take a break. We'll be back with more of our Voice of the Voter Candidate Forum right after this. Welcome back to our News Center Maine Voice of the Voter Forum with the candidates for governor. We have reached the closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute. We begin with the Republican, former Governor Paul LePage.
Maine faces some challenging times ahead. Our economy is broken. We are failing our kids with an extreme woke agenda. Our test scores are collapsing. Our small businesses are under attack. Janet Mills' solution: more money, more money, more money. Remember, too much money hides a lot of sins. Ask yourself, are you better today than you were 4 years ago? Is your grocery bill more affordable today than 4 years ago? Is your electricity bill more affordable today than 4 years ago? Can Mainers even find heating oil? Never mind the price. Are Mainers working, and is our economy growing? No, it's not. I have the skill set to move Maine forward. I did it once, I can do it again. And I never, ever tried to increase the sales tax 6.5%. That was the Democrats, and I was willing to shut government down to prevent it.
Governor Paul LePage, thank you so much. And finally, the Democrat, Governor Janet Mills.
It is about leadership. Paul LePage has a record of his own. The most vetoes of any governor in history. A government shutdown, higher sales tax, higher property taxes, slow economic growth, denial of health care, and underfunded schools, and cuts to senior citizens' prescription drug programs, fighting, stalemate, falsehoods, vitriol. Do you want to go back? We've been through some tough times together, and there are challenges ahead. I led Maine through a pandemic that threatened the lives and livelihoods of our people, and we succeeded better than nearly any state in the country. Our unemployment is low. We have more jobs than before the pandemic. Our economic growth is 11th best in the nation. We've cut taxes, delivered property tax relief, put $850 tax relief checks in your pockets. More people have health care. Sure, we have challenges ahead. I know that. But in me, you will find a governor who listens, who tells the truth, who works to fight problems, not people, and who will deliver solutions, not vitriol. I ask for your vote on November 8th. Let's move Maine forward, not backwards. Thank you.
Governor Janet Mills, thank you. And that wraps up our Voice of the Voter Forum. Our thanks to both of the candidates for being here with us. Our thanks to the Maine State Chamber of Commerce and the Holiday Inn by the Bay for hosting us as well, and to all of you for watching and taking part. Don't forget to vote on November 8th or before, if that's what you like to do. Stay with News Center Maine for continuing Voice of the Voter coverage through Election Day and beyond. For all of us, thank you for being with us, and good night.
Thank you, Pat.